So Michael Cow, he
Hmm.
took the approach that a lot of the issues that you find um, regarding inflation have to do with geopolitical aspects, and this is often
Hmm.
overlooked because all we discuss is how much money. Primarily, what is being discussed is how much money is being printed. But in reality, when you look at previous points in history, it was often geopolitical. So just to sort of run through his take very sort of briefly, um, what he considers this hyperinflation, hyperventilation, he called it, like we're
Hmm.
hyperventilating about hyperinflation.
Yeah.
It seems to focus on the ratio between debt to GDP, and the current national debt of the US is 28 trillion, and the current GDP is 22 trillion. So the debt to GDP ratio there is at 127%, which is pretty high. And you could consider that being at an all-time high, actually, even above World War II peak.
Yeah.
And he argues that the main reason for the loss in the Reichsmark in Germany um, was not particularly because of just printing money or money velocity or any of these factors that we discuss heavily today, but that it was actually geopolitical. I
Hmm.
don't agree or disagree. I'm just a student here, so I'm trying to, figure this shit out myself. But he then goes on to explain that, like I said, it is geopolitical, and that one key moment was when France invaded the Ruhr Valley, um, which is also a key sort of economical a place for Germany, right?
Hmm.
Um, and France invaded the Ruhr Valley when Germany couldn't pay up their reparations anymore. Um, and this was very important to what then happened afterwards, which was hyperinflation. So he argues even that geopolitical factors matter more than monetary factors when determining whether or not this country's currency is going to hold or not. An example is also Japan. Japan debt to GDP ratio is double that of the US,
Yeah. Yeah.
and still not like groundbreaking inflation, right? And he's saying that it's because of geopolitical stability, right? Um, One way to measure geopolitical stability is looking at U.S. waterways, right? Is it intact? Because the waterways is what you use to ship cargo and ship resources and so forth, right? The waterways are also what you use to extract fresh water from, because that's what people need. We humans are made up of mostly water, which is still baffling to me. Sort of water talking to water. But looking at these kind of things is really important. And I didn't up until that point. It's one of those things that are obvious, right, when you read it, but aren't discussed so much. So he then goes on to explain that you compare China's waterways, and they're very problematic. You have the Yellow Yangtze River that is flooded all the time.
Yeah.
China is also fighting with India over, I believe, it's a river or some kind of very important territorial space. And the U.S. waterways are still intact, and the freshwater supply is still there. So the waterway thing also goes back to something that we all heard about earlier this year, about, or was it earlier this year or last year, the Suez Canal,
It was
where
this
that
year.
ship, exactly. So where that ship sort of blocked the other ships from going through, and itself being able to sort of
Yeah.
circle around. And I don't know the actual stats, but it was several billion that were lost in that period, and people
I think
don't realize.
yeah. I think it must have been a lot more.
Yeah, and people
Yeah.
don't realize how important that is for shit to actually work.
Hmm.
because we just go out and go to the supermarket and buy the shit and just leave or whatever. But in reality, it has to come from somewhere, and it's through ship cargo. It's through some type of transport, through trucks and so forth. So all of these things have to be considered when looking at inflation. And if any of these kind of things breaks down or is in any way jeopardized, that will be also a key factor in inflation. And in his explanation, he would say that is the most important factor.
Hmm.
And and I was just really baffled by that. He goes on to then just to close off here, he goes on to then explain um, more geopolitical factors like how well is the U.S. Cooperating with its neighbors, right? And then you have good relationship or semi good relationship with Mexico, right? You have
Hmm.
a pretty good relationship with Canada, and you compare that with China, very hostile relationship with Taiwan, not so good relationship with South Korea, right? Japan, I mean Japan, Japanese people and Chinese people is it's troublesome. Um, and India, I mean they're pretty much at war. So all of these things do play a big factor in inflation. So and on the flip side, obviously, China has all of these great things going for them. I read that they're graduating more engineers than the U.S. They're graduating more engineers every year than the U.S. has, and a lot of these things make you think that China's doing a lot better. But what's happening in reality is that China is doing a lot better in certain aspects, but is yeah, quite behind in other aspects. And the
Yeah.
U.S. is naturally ahead of China. Um, and when I say naturally, I mean by having good waterways, by having fresh water supplies, by having food, water, energy, water ways, friendly neighbors,
Hmm.
oceanic buffers, and most importantly, a free market capitalist system that doesn't jail billionaires and
Yeah.
put them away and stuff like that. So yeah, that goes to say that inflation might actually be transitory, as Jay Powell was saying, based on um, additional factors that are often not discussed, and this one being geopolitical. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say regarding that. What do you think?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So I think, yeah, regarding inflation, there was always this interesting debate. Like it's not as simple as existing money supply, you print more, you get inflation. That's not how it works. For some reason, you would think it works like that, but it
But
doesn't.
this is what everybody keeps saying, and it's like, where is it? Like, come on,
Yeah,
I mean,
it's not here. It's not here. And
so
regarding what I was saying, I'll just briefly go back to that. I think they had some employment numbers, and one of the not I'm not going to use strong words. One of the signals for inflation is rising wages, and based on the
another one.
numbers they had on employment, they weren't going that up actually. Like they were
Yeah,
single digit, small single digit differences, which you kind of would expect after people have been given a check for a month, right? For like
absolutely.
for the past year. So obviously you're gonna have to give them some more money to start working. But there isn't a groundbreaking amount of extra money you have to give them. So where is the inflation? Because except in even J Powell was speaking about this in some fringe areas of the economy like lumber and like semiconductors and some other stuff where there definitely are for like supply chain constraints and materials and everything and backlogs of orders and all a lot of reasons, we're not seeing inflation, so it's not here.
We're not.
So there
Yeah,
has to be something more. And I guess the whole geopolitical status is it's like it's America's weight being put behind a dollar, and you're like asking everybody what you gonna do about it, and they're like nothing, America, right? Because that it should be like that. Like people in Europe should be like, okay, I'm not accepting $1 for euro anymore. They never did, but like but they're not. They're like,
and
okay,
they're
yes,
still
America, of course, yeah, yeah,
exactly
okay,
they're still
however
accepting
you
it.
want it.
Yeah,
That's how it
yeah,
is. So it's
So,
like geopolitical military strength combined with a lot of aspects, and apparently there isn't substantial
yeah,
inflation here.
yeah.
So
Military is another
makes
one
sense.
that that
Yeah, yeah.
that that I didn't touch on, like having the strongest military. And I actually, and I want to be careful not to get the message off as if printing money, or printing like 20% of all of the existing supply in a single year is not going to have damaging effects. And I don't think this is what we're trying to say. I think we're trying to add a little bit more nuance to the discussion, saying that it's not as simple as that. But the the fact that the Fed is printing that much money in that short amount of time will come back